So I think right now the majority of people that are using these Stasis subclasses are using Cold Snap Grenades, and for good reason. They're pretty damn good. Instant freezes and tracking and chaining those are pretty good, but hear me out. I think that Glacier Grenades are, as much as they might take a little bit more effort to use, they have a significantly higher skill ceiling. So I'm pretty sure that basically means they have a higher skill floor, so they are a bit harder to use, but a higher skill ceiling to go along with that, because they give you a lot more potential plays to make with them due to their versatility. This is episode 2 of my Crucible Mastery series, where I go over different techniques, topics, theory, and loadout building for the Crucible that I use to improve my play, that I'm here to share with you, and perhaps you might get some value out of it. As I mentioned, I think Glacier Grenades are the key to really truly unlocking Stasis potential and giving yourself an incredibly high skill ceiling with the plays that you're able to make. There are 4 basic functions of the Glacier Grenade, and honestly that's quite a bit just for one grenade. You're able to, firstly, freeze targets. It doesn't have nearly as generous of a radius or a time freezing targets, of course, as something like a cold snap, but it's still, if you place the grenade and time it correctly, well, able to freeze targets. Secondly, it can be used as cover. Of course, it makes a wall, a relatively tall wall of ice or stasis, whatever you want to call it, that you can use to create cover for yourself when you're lacking it to peek shoot or give yourself a left peek, which is advantageous, of course, or other simple things like giving yourself cover to regenerate health or block some sort of a projectile or something, some weapon of some sort, an ability, etc. The third ability of the Glacier Grenade is to cause damage by detonating the glacier. So when you shoot these or shatter dive them or trigger a shatter in some way, they will deal damage, of course. That damage has been significantly reduced over some updates from what it originally was, I'm sure as many people know, but it's still good for keeping targets weak or just trying to collectively deal damage where in some scenarios you wouldn't be able to. And lastly, and probably most importantly, you can use these grenades to create platforms. You can use it to create angles like head glitches, height advantages, and other things, or awkward angles in general, that wouldn't exist otherwise. And that's a massive complaint I have about Destiny 2 maps, is there aren't many interesting angles to take, there aren't many inherent height advantages or power positions, and there aren't very many head glitches. So the Glacier Grenades can actually be used to create these scenarios for you on different maps and take very unexpected angles that people really aren't ready for, and will allow you, especially in something like trials, to get an initial pick and win a round, or be the difference between life and death and staying alive, especially when an enemy team is trying to get aggressive on you or put pressure on you and maybe even super you. So those are our 4 main ways to use Glacier Grenades. That's our toolbox that Glacier Grenades grant us, and because there's so many different ways to use it, that means we have a lot of creativity on the fly of how or what we're going to do with them. But it's essential that we're constantly thinking and being aware of every line of play that we have with these grenades. Now, this is where we get into the Stasis Fragments. The Fragments are able to greatly increase the potential and potency of each of those effects and ways that we can use the Glacier Grenade. I'm well aware that Cold Snaps and Hedrons getting that damage buff, especially if you're using a 120, which you probably are, is very potentially powerful, but I see it as very linear. It really just is one play you have to make, and that is throw your Cold Snap, hopefully it tracks them and freezes them, get your damage buff, and then profit. And while that is very easy to do, like I said, it's very linear. It's only one play to make, and if you have an enemy that is anticipant of that, that is a lot harder to pull off, and it really just takes, in my opinion, being aware of it. I don't mean to oversimplify it. It isn't that simple, of course, but I just think that it falls apart a little bit more when you are trying to bait those things and you're more aware of it. With the Glacier Grenade, I want to say you have 3 main fragments that are going to directly contribute to the potential of your Glacier Grenade and also expand on the ways that you can use it more significantly. We have Whisper of Fissures, Whisper of Chains, and Whisper of Shards. Like I said, I think these are the 3 best fragments to be using with Glacier Grenades. I mentioned that the damage of the Glacier Grenades was greatly reduced to the point where sometimes it's barely any damage, and the lethality isn't a factor to be thinking of a lot of the time. Whisper of Fissures brings that damage back up to its pre-nerf numbers without fissures, which still means it's very lethal. If you're a hunter, that means your Shadow Dive is most likely going to be very lethal again. And what does that mean? It means you now have another open play for you to make to take advantage of the lethality aspect of your grenade. Whisper of Chains gives you, I believe, 20% or so, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but something relatively significant of damage resistance while you're within 15 meters, a very generous radius, of a Glacier Grenade. This essentially boosts all utility-based non-lethal aspects of your Glacier Grenade. Why? Because now it gives you the choice to be able to put these down as cover and live better and have a harder time dying as a result of using this as cover. This turns off the ability to 3-tap of 140 RPM hand cannons and makes the 120s require 3 headshots, which is very, very good. More importantly than that, there is a ridiculous amount of damage boost in the Crucible, like Whisper of Hedrons, and this is now your direct counter. When you know there's a damage buff presence, like Hedrons off a Cold Snap, you can put down your Glacier Grenades and you're essentially turning that off and returning it to normal damage numbers. So again, yet another play that you can make with your Glacier Grenades. But other than that, when you're taking your angles, when you're creating head glitches, when you're putting down cover, it just means you're going to be overall harder to kill, which is always a benefit. Finally, we have Whisper of Shards, which allows us to shatter Glacier Grenades anywhere, our own, teammates, or enemies, to temporarily boost our grenade recharge rate so we can get our Glacier back quicker. This increases the overall uptime of our Glacier Grenades, which is really important because they're so applicable to so many scenarios and there's so many plays you can make at so many points in the match with these grenades. We want to have them frequently so that we can use them without thinking. We just want to be able to see a potential play, a potential line of play where it's applicable, put it down, use it as intended, and get it back ASAP. So being able to chain that uptime is really important, and that's why I love Whisper of Shards. Before we finish talking about the theory of Glacier Grenades and different plays you can make, I wanted to cover the unique plays you can make of each different class with Glacier Grenades. They each have something unique. So the Hunter obviously has Shadow Dive, which makes Glacier Grenades a super high lethal option in pretty much an instant to get someone out of your close range when they're being over aggressive on you. Typically, you want to only do this defensively as there is some ample risk in it. It's not as lethal and forgiving as it once was. So you want to really use this to punish people trying to be way too overly aggressive on you. But you can try and use it as an entry frag mechanic if you're well supported by your team. Titans get the ability to slide, the Glacioclasm slide, or a melee ability through their grenade, which allows them to use it as a tool to close the gap and then deal damage while breaking through it, which can be quite unpredictable for an enemy. Warlocks get a pretty unique usage out of this because they're able to set these up as platforms and then put their healing or empowering rift on this, which I think is insanely unexpected, and most people aren't going to see this coming. Because you're able to make grenade angles and take different angles or head glitches in different places, you get that aspect of Top Tree Dawn now on Stasis essentially. Top Tree Dawn's able to eat its nade and take some weird angles in the sky, but you still incur that in-air accuracy penalty. Whereas with this, you can take similar angles, maybe not quite as many, but you can create angles for yourself that are unpredictable while not having to deal with the in-air accuracy penalty. And for Warlocks, it could be in some ways better because you can put a healing rift or an empowering rift, which is highly lethal, on top of that, which is just insane, I think. Now that we finished talking a lot about the theory of using Glacier Grenades, I want to talk a little bit more about technique, and one thing in specific. How do you use these to consistently take angles? A lot of people ask me in my Twitch chat, how do you use the Glacier Grenade to consistently land the way you want them to land to take the angle that you effectively want to take? And what I have to say is that this is all dependent on how you throw the grenade based on the angle that you are throwing it at the wall that you are aiming to throw it at. I feel like that sounds confusing, but it's basically just the angle in which you are looking at the wall. That is the way that the grenade is going to land. So if you throw a glacier grenade at a wall and you're not really facing it, it's kind of at a weird angle, it's probably always going to land vertically, completely vertically. If you have a wall that's kind of at a 45-degree angle or so, you're not quite facing it, but you can see it at a 45-degree angle, the grenade's also going to land at an angle. It's probably going to have a little bit of a slope to it. However, if you want your grenade to land completely horizontally every single time, your character needs to be directly facing and looking at the wall. If you do this, it will land horizontally every single time. Another thing we need to talk about that falls a little bit more into technique is the fact that the glacier grenades will also boost you and boost your speed. Basically, when you place a glacier grenade under your character, it'll bump you up a bit. This is a lot less than what it used to be on launch because it was nerfed, but it still definitely does work. When you put the glacier grenade under your character, it'll boost you up a little bit. However, if you place the glacier grenade under your character and then jump immediately, it'll boost you a lot higher and a lot faster. Now, this little boost that the glacier grenades give you also comes into play when creating angles, because you might be thinking to yourself, how do you create angles at weird places if you have to be looking directly at the wall that you want to be making a horizontal platform on? And how do you throw the grenade and then stand on the grenade if you start falling as you throw the grenade? It's a little weird. So we're gonna go over to banner fall here. This is one of my favorite angles to take off the start of a game, and it's a perfect example here. So for this, I want to go and jump up to the place that I want to put the angle. So I'm going to use my first jump to get there. Then I'm going to use my second jump to get towards the wall and looking horizontally at the wall. But I'm going to look nearly straight down and then throw my grenade down towards the wall, but under my character. So by the time it spawns, we're going to be facing one of these sides of the grenade, and that is going to boost us up and put us on top of the grenade. Now, it's really key that you are looking down while placing your grenade on the wall, because if you place it horizontally or directly in front of you, you're gonna fall through it. Like, it'll just make you fall through the grenade and you have to jump back up there again. And sometimes if you're going for crazy angles, you're not going to be able to jump up there again. So you got to make sure that you're always placing your grenades under your character, under where you want to land. And this isn't going to be the same all the time. Sometimes you're going to see an angle, you're going to go, okay, I'm going to jump, and then I'm going to throw the grenade, and then I'm going to jump up again with your hunter jump if you're playing hunter, and that'll help you get on there. I think this is probably a little bit more difficult to do with the other characters and the way their jumps work, but I think for Titan you might not have too bad of a time. For Warlock, you might really always need to be placing the glacier grenade under your feet to make sure that it gives you the boost to get on it. So just keep that in mind. When you are taking angles, we want to remember that glacier grenades, when I time them, last for 14 seconds, and this is really important to keep in mind because of course your angle is going to run out, and before it runs out, you want to shatter your grenades to then use your Whisper of Shards to get it back quicker to take and use the next application of your glacier grenade. You want to constantly be refreshing them, either to take angles or just whatever the next application is. To end this episode, I hope that I've done a good job at showing you guys all the different application of the glacier grenades, and that's really the skill in them. They're not as simple as cold snaps. You have to be always keenly aware of every single application of these grenades so you know when to use it and how to use it properly. Do you want to turn off a damage buff because of Whisper of Chains? Do you want to create a platform or angle for yourself? Do you recognize a head glitch you could create for yourself? You got to keep in mind the duration so you constantly be refreshing it. Do you want to use it for lethality and shatter someone that's getting over aggressive? Do you want to use it as a boost of speed? How about using it as cover and a boost of speed? How about using it as damage resistance and an angle? There's different ways that these interactions all cross over with each other. How about putting a glacier grenade up as an angle that also uses it as cover and then shattering it when someone starts getting over aggressive? These are the things you can start putting together with the different ways and applications and elements of the glacier grenade, and that is what makes it the highest potential, highest skill ceiling grenade for Stasis, and as a result, I think it's the best. And I hope you guys see some value in it too. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.